Hello, welcome to the channel. My name is JonHut, and today I want to share with you dBuzz, a free, powerful plugin that I create with Patcher, available for every FL Studio user. In this tutorial, we are going to have a look in deep to the plugin. We are going to have a listen to some examples and also the installation process. Now, in order to use dBuzz, you must to download a free transient shaper by Kilohertz, which I'm gonna leave the link to download this free plugin on the description below. And you also need to have at least the Free Producer Edition, as Maximus is part of the DNA of dBuzz. And unfortunately, Maximus is not included on the basic Free Edition. dBuzz is meant to be the only plugin that you need on your drum bass, as it will cover transient design, parallel processing, saturation, soft clipping, multiband stereo separation, essential mid-side EQ, and a dedicated module to add noise. With dBuzz, you can get the best out of your drums, as it will glue your drum bass, it will add punch, and it will increase the overall volume at the same time that reduces extra peaks. A really important step before the mastering process, because if you try to get the best out of your drums on the mastering process, that means that you are going to have to push harder the compressor, the clipper, limiter, etc., which probably will introduce saturation, and that's not what we want. What we want for our final master is to sound as clean and as loud as possible. So that's why dBuzz can have a huge impact on your production. So with that said, let's start with this tutorial. Okay, this is dBuzz. So first of all, let's do a quick overview of the plugin. So dBuzz have 4 different modules. We have the main module, the noise module, the stereo separation module, and the control module. Now, before I show you in deep each of the modules, I just want to explain the control module, because we are going to have a look to each individual module together with the control module, so you can have a better understanding of the plugin. So the control module have 2 different utilities. The first one is to visualize the routing of this plugin. And the second utility is to enable or disable some of the processing of the plugin. So as you can see on the control module, a part of the input and output and also the input calibration, we have 3 different buttons. We have the square button, which cannot be modified. Then we have the circle buttons, where you can disable or enable some of the processing of this plugin. And last, we have the diamond buttons. So if I click a diamond button, you can see that it's enabled, but if I release the mouse, the button doesn't stay down. The reason for that is because this processing, the noise module, soft clipping, and multiband separation, and the EQ can be enabled or disabled from his respective module. So the noise module, if I go into the noise and I enable the noise module, now if I come back to the control, you can see that the noise module is being enabled. And then if I go to the main module and I enable the clipper and the mid-side EQ, and now I come back to the control, you can see that the soft limiting, multiband separation, and the EQ both are enabled. Now, once all of these processes are enabled from the control panel, you can disable the EQ, the soft limiting and multiband separation, and the noise module, but it doesn't affect the processing at all. So if I go back to the noise, you can see that the noise module still being enabled. And if I go to the main panel, you can see that the soft limiting and multiband separation and the EQ still being enabled. So coming back to the control module, remember to don't touch the diamond buttons, as will not affect the processing of the plugin. It only have a visualization purpose. So now that we cover the control module, let's have a look to the main module. Okay, so here on the main module, before I show you each individual knob, let's have a look of what is happening with our signal. So here on the control module, we can see that the first step that we have on this routing is the input calibration. We are going to have a look now in a second. Then after the input calibration, the signal got split into attack and body. So first, let's have a look to the attack. So the attack have a parallel processing distortion, and then the parallel signal and the attack goes into a soft clipping, saturation, and multiband separation. And with the body, we also have a parallel processing, in this case, multiband compressor, and then the dry signal and the parallel signal goes together into a soft clipping, saturation, and multiband separation. Now, from here, the attack can go into the noise module to add an extra layer of texture if you want. And then both of the signal, the attack and the body goes together into a soft limiting and multiband separation. Then after the soft limiting and multiband separation, the signal goes into the frequency splitter. After the frequency splitter, the signal goes into a shape module. And after the shape module, the signal goes into a mid and side essential EQ. And last of this routing, we also have the input calibration. Okay, so now that we cover the routing of the plugin, let's have a look of how we control the amount of each processing. So back into the main panel, here on top, we have the bypass button. So you can enable or disable the plugin. Next, we have the main three knobs, the attack, the body, and the shape. So first, let's have a look to the attack. So what the attack knob does, it controls the amount of amplification of the transient, also control the amount of parallel processing that we add, and it also controls the amount of soft clipping and saturation. And it does all with a single knob in a really musical way. Next, with the body knob, which controls the amount of amplification of the body, the amount of parallel processing that we add, and also controls the amount of soft clipping and saturation. Same as the attack knob, it does all of this processing with a single knob in a really musical way. Now, under the attack and the body knob, we have this circle button. With these two circle buttons, you can listen in solo the body of the drum bass or the transient or attack of the drum bass. And last, we have the shape knob, which is another transient shaper, and it works together with the pump knob and the speed knob. It can be enabled or disabled from the control module by enabling or disabling the shape. So the shape knob controls the amount of attenuation that we apply to the sustain of the drum bass. So as I mentioned earlier, you control the shape knob together with the pump and the speed knob. So the pump knob controls the amount of attenuation directly after the transient, which emphasizes the transient without increasing the level. And with the speed knob, if we set a higher values, will result in a snappier transient modification. And with lower values will result in smoother curves. Next, on each of these main knobs, you can see that there is another small knob in the middle, which control the range of how the attack, the body, or the shape is being detected through the transient plugin. If you want to know a little bit more about how to use this knob, I have a good explanation on my last video using the randomness, which I'm gonna leave the link of the video on the description below. Next, we have the width knob, which controls the stereo separation at the end of the processing. Next, on the top left corner, we have the soft limiting and multiband separation. So if you want to use it, simply enable the processing, and with this knob, you can control the amount of soft limiting that you apply to the drum bass. Remember, as I mentioned earlier, that when is enabled, if I go to the control module, you can see that now the soft limiting is being enabled. Next, here on the bottom, we have the mid-side EQ. So if you want to use it, first of all, enable the mid-side EQ. So on the mid EQ, we have a low shelf shape and a high shelf shape. So you can boost or reduce the low frequencies, and you can also boost or reduce the high frequencies. And then on the side EQ, we have a high cut filter and a low cut filter. So you can cut low frequencies from the side and also cut high frequencies from the side. Next, we have the output slider, which control the output of the plugin. And last, on the main module, we have the input calibration. Now, the input calibration doesn't change the volume of the signal at all. The purpose of the input calibration is to calibrate how the plugin works. So by default, which is 0 or these 3 dots, the plugin will work really well when your drum bass have an average of -6 dB, or when the maximum peak level is around -6 dB. But not everyone works at the same level, so that's the purpose of the input calibration. So let's imagine that you like to have -10 dB of headroom. So if our drums are peaking around -10 decibels, in order to make the plugin works well, we need to add 4 decibels. And now the plugin will work perfectly without changing the volume of our drums. Another example, it can be that instead of -10 or even -6 dB of headroom, you like to work at around -3 dB of headroom. So what we have to do with our calibration is to reduce the input signal by 3 dBs. Remember, as I mentioned earlier, that on the default position, the plugin will work perfectly at -6 dB of headroom. So if you like to work at -3 dB headrooms, then increase the input calibration by 3 dB. Now, in order to visualize exactly what the input calibration does, I'm simply gonna go to -18 dBs. So now if I go into the control module, the input signal is being decreased by 18 dBs. But after all of the processing, I'm adding +18 dBs. So as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't affect the level of our drums. And now let's have a look into the noise module. Okay, so here on the noise module, the first thing that I have to do if I want to use it is to enable the noise module. So once enabled, we have 3 main knobs: the level, the tension, and the decay. So with the level, we can control the amount of noise that we add into the signal. With the tension knob, we can control the tension curve of the noise. And with the decay knob, we basically control the duration of the noise. Then with this button, as you can see now, the color is white, which means that the noise is a white noise. But if I click the button, it becomes pink, which means that the noise now is a pink noise. Next, we have a low pass filter and a high pass filter for the noise. And last, on the noise module, on the top left corner, we can control how we want the noise. So right now, the noise is mono. If you want the noise to be stereo, simply enable the stereo button. And now let's have a look to the stereo separation module. Okay, so here on the stereo separation module, we can control the stereo separation of the low frequencies, mid frequencies, high frequencies, or the entire spectrum, either of the attack, the body, or the entire drum bass. Now, with the knobs, if you set it fully to the right, this frequency range will become mono. And if you set it fully to the left, you are gonna open the stereo of this frequency range. Next, on the attack and body section, you also have this circle button where you can listen in solo the attack or the body. Last, here on the bottom, we have these 4 buttons. And the purpose of this button is to listen in solo the low frequencies, the mid frequencies, or the high frequencies. So let's imagine that I want to listen in solo the attack or the transient of my drum bass. And at the same time, I want to listen in solo the low frequencies. So I will be listening to only the low frequencies of the attack or transient of the drum bass. Same if I want to listen to the mid frequencies of the body. So with this setting, I can listen the mid frequencies of the body. And the last button and the master is a quick access to listen in mono your entire drum bass. So if you enable this button, the drum bass will become mono. The purpose of this button is to have a quick access to listen in mono the drum bass. Now, I just want to clarify something. So the master section of the stereo separation module will only work when the soft limiting and multiband separation is being enabled. So right now that is not enabled. If I change the setting, will not affect the sound at all. If I want to use this stereo separation section of the master, then I have to go to the main panel and enable the soft limiting multiband separation. So now coming back to the stereo separation module, now I can modify the stereo separation of the low, mid, high frequencies and also the entire spectrum of the master. Now, the solo frequency buttons, the low, mid and high only works when the frequency splitter on the control module is enabled. If I disable the frequency splitter, now these buttons will no longer work. So if you don't want to use this button, simply disable the frequency splitter from the control module, which will reduce the CPU usage of the plugin, as when you enable the frequency splitter, it also enables the linear phase mode of the frequency splitter, which introduce latency and also increase the CPU usage. So a good practice of using the frequency splitter is to enable it only when you want to modify the stereo separation module. And after you finish with this process, it's good to come back to the control module and disable the frequency splitter. Okay, so now that we cover all of the different modules, let's have a listen to some examples. Okay, so here on the playlist, I have 4 different drum loops. Now, I create these drum loops using a really high quality samples, which means that I didn't apply any processing at all to create these drum loops. The only thing that I did is to balance the volume of the samples with a volume fader. I also want to mention that I normalize all of these drum loops, which means that the maximum peak level of this drum loop is going to be 0 dB. Now, in order to better understand what the D-Bass plugin does, I also add to the master channel an oscilloscope, so we can listen to what the D plugin does and also we can visualize it. So let me press play and let's have a listen to the drum loop number 1. Okay, as you can listen, the drum loop sounds already pretty good. But first of all, I want to take care of these extra peaks when the clap and snare hit together. Then I'm also gonna add a bit of punch and I'm gonna tighten up the body of the drum loop. So I send the drum loop to the insert 1 and I add a D bass. Now I'm gonna enable the plugin, and for this drum loop, I'm simply gonna crank the attack knob and the body knob. So now let's have a listen to it. Okay, as you can listen, there is quite a lot of distortion going on, which means that I'm applying a lot of processing to this drum loop. But that's not because I crank the attack and body knob. As I mentioned earlier, I normalize all of these drum loops, which means that all of them are peaking at 0 dB. And as I explained with the input calibration, this plugin works really well with an average of -6 dB per octave. So if this drum loop is peaking on 6 dB, it means that I have to calibrate the plugin, otherwise I'm gonna have a lot of distortion and a lot of processing. And that's not what we want. So I'm gonna go to the input calibration and I'm gonna reduce the input by 6 dB. So now let me press play and let's have a listen to it. Okay, now it sounds much better, but as we can see on the peak meter, the signal goes above 0 dB, and that's not what we want. So to fix this issue, I'm simply gonna enable the soft limiting and I'm gonna crank the amount knob. And now let's have a listen to it. Now I have everything on this drum loop under control. The last thing that I'm gonna do, I'm gonna enable the mid-side EQ and I'm gonna reduce a little bit the high frequencies of the mid signal, which has been increased due to the amount that I add to the attack knob. Okay, and now I'm just gonna make a space to better visualize the oscilloscope, and we are gonna have a listen before and after all of this processing. So pay attention not just how this drum loop sounds before and after, you can also have a look into the meter, because at the end, we are gonna have the same maximum peak level, but we are increasing the overall volume. You can visualize that with the RMS level. So let's have a listen before and after. So as you can hear and visualize, I glue this drum bass. It have way more punch, and I also control all of the extra peaks, and all of that by only tweaking 4 simple knobs. So let's have a listen to the next example. Okay, so for this drum loop, before I apply any processing, I just want to listen again to the drum loop with Ozone Imager, which is a vector scope to visualize the stereo, and also with the span, which is a frequency analyzer, and also the oscilloscope. The reason for that is because I noticed something wrong with the stereo, and I want to see if everything looks okay on this metering. Now, if you want to know how to use these meterings, I made a dedicated video about it, which I'm gonna leave the link of the video on the description below. And now let's have a listen again to this drum loop. Okay, it doesn't look that bad, but here on the spectrum frequency, the white line are the mid frequencies and the blue line are the side frequency. So as you can see, there is quite a lot of side information on the low frequencies. So that's one of the issues that I'm gonna fix with the D-Bass plugin. And I'm also gonna use D-Bass to add punch and to glue this drum loop, and also to control all of these extra peaks. So let me close all of these plugins, and now this drum loop is going to the insert number 2, and in here I already add the D-Bass plugin. So first thing, I'm gonna enable the plugin, and the first thing that I wanna fix is all of the amount of side information that I have on the low frequencies. Now with the D-Bass plugin, we have multiple ways to fix this issue. So first of all, let me go and open again the spectrum analyzer, and now I'm gonna press play and fix this issue. Now normally I will do that while listening to the drum loop, but for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just gonna mute the audio, and I'm gonna show you every step so you can visualize how I fix all of these side frequencies on the low frequencies. Okay, so the easiest way to fix this issue is by using the mid-side EQ. So I'm gonna enable the EQ, and now I'm gonna cut all of the unnecessary low frequencies that I have on the side. And now, as you can see, I don't have any more side frequencies on the low range. Okay, another way that I can fix this issue is by using the stereo separation. Now, with this module, I can definitely fine-tune and also see from where exactly this issue is coming. So I'm gonna press play, and now I'm gonna solo the attack. So by soloing the attack, I can see there is not quite a lot of low frequencies from the attack. I can even isolate the low frequencies. So as you can see, I don't have any problem with the attack on the low frequencies. Now, if I solo the mid frequencies, in here, I definitely have some issue. So first of all, I'm gonna reduce the stereo separation of the attack on the mid frequencies. And now, as you can see, it's been reduced quite a lot. Now I'm gonna listen everything. Okay, but I'm still having this problem. Okay, and now let's have a listen to the body of this drum loop. So as you can see, there is quite a lot of side information on the low range. So first of all, I'm gonna listen in solo the low frequencies of the body. And I'm gonna make it fully mono. Now I don't have any side information on the low range. Now I'm gonna put in solo the mid frequencies. And I'm gonna reduce a little bit the stereo separation. Maybe a little bit more. Okay, now let's have a listen to the whole drum loop. So as you can see, I successfully reduced the amount of side information on the low frequencies. And now let's have a listen before and after. As you can hear now, the low frequencies sounds way cleaner. Okay, now I'm gonna put in loop this drum loop too, and I'm gonna fine tune with the rest of the settings. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I normalize all of this drum loop. So this drum loop in particular sometimes is peaking at 0 dB, but the average volume of this drum loop is around -3. So first of all, I'm gonna calibrate the plugin by reducing the input around -3 dB. And now let me press play. Let's fine-tune with the plugin. Okay, and now one more time, let's have a listen before and after this drum loop. Okay, and now let's have a listen before and after the loop number 3, which this time I also use the noise module. Okay, and last, let's have a listen before and after to the drum loop number 4. Now, this time, once I enable the plugin, I'm also gonna go to the control module and I'm gonna disable some of the processing of the plugin. So you can also listen of what each processing is doing. Okay, so now that we listen all of these sound examples, let me show you the installation process. Okay, so the installation process is really easy. First of all, download the zip of the D-Bass plugin from the description below. Then once you have the zip, double click on it and open the zip. Now in here you have the folder. If I go into the folder, we have 3 different documents. So we have the D-Bass manual, we have the D-Bass plugin, and also a PDF with the kilohertz website. So first of all, we need to install the free transient shaper of kilohertz. Double click on the kilohertz PDF and then go a little bit down and in here where it says Kilohertz Essential, click on download and it will open in Safari or your favorite browser. Now here on the Kilohertz website, simply go to the download tab, click on it and then click again on the download. And in here it will pop up this window asking you for your email. Now don't be scared to share your email with them. They are not gonna send you offers, spam or anything like that. They are gonna send you the license of all of these plugin. So simply input your email and click on send installer. Then once you input your email, you are gonna get an email with all of the license, and also you are gonna be able to download the Kilohertz Essential. Now, once you have downloaded the installer, simply double click on it, and here we have the installer program. So simply go to the install tab, and in here automatically will select all of the plugins from this bundle. You are free to install all of them, but the only one that you need is a transient shaper. So if you don't want to install any, simply go to select none, then go to the bottom, and in here you have the transient shaper. That's the only plugin that you need to use the bus. So click on the transient shaper and click on install. Then once you have the Kilohertz installed, go to FL Studio and add the Kilohertz transient shaper to your plugin database. Open it for the first time and input the license. Now, once you have input the license, that's all that you have to do with the free transient shaper of Kilohertz. Now, in order to add the dBus plugin to your plugin list, simply go to a plugin database, effects, and in here select your favorite folder. Now, as is dynamic, for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm gonna select the folder dynamic. So I'm gonna right click on dynamic and click on open. And now with this folder, I just have to take the dBus plugin, left click on it and drag and drop into the dynamic folder. So now if I go into the mixer and I try to add a plugin, I just have to go to the dynamic folder, and in here I have the dBus plugin. Now, another way to open the plugin is by simply double click on the dBus plugin, and FL Studio will automatically open the plugin for you. And last, we have the dBus manual. So simply double click on it and FL Studio will open automatically the manual for you. Now, I divided the manual into the 4 different modules. You have the main module, the noise module, the stereo module, and the control module. And another way to access to the manual is straight from the plugin. So if I come into the mixer and I open an instance of a dBus plugin, I just have to go to the map tab, and here on the top right corner, you always have the manual ready for you. Simply click on it and it will open the manual for you. The main module, noise module, stereo separation module, and the control module. Okay, that's all for me. Hope you like this plugin as much as I do. If you have any question, please leave a comment below. Thank you very much for watching. My name is JonHut.